Introduction. What you will learn from reading this book. The Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, of the United States defines an individual as an accredited investor if the individual has $200,000 or more in annual income, or $300,000 or more in annual income as a couple, or $1 million or more in net worth. The SEC established these requirements to protect the average investor from some of the worst and most risky investments in the world. The problem is that these investor requirements also shield the average investor from some of the best investments in the world, which is one reason why Rich Dad's advice to the average investor was, don't be average. Starting with nothing. This book begins with my return from Vietnam in 1973. I had less than a year to go before I was going to be discharged from the Marine Corps. That meant that in less than a year I was going to have no job, no money, and no assets. So this book begins at a point that many of you may recognize, and that is a point of starting with nothing. All I had in 1973 was the dream of someday being very rich and becoming an investor who could qualify to invest in the investments of the rich. These are investments that few people ever hear about, that are not written about in the financial newspapers, and are not sold over the counter by investment brokers. This book begins when I had nothing but a dream and my rich dad's guidance to become an investor. This book should be of interest to you whether you have very little money to invest or have a lot to invest, whether you know very little about investing or you know a lot about investing. It is about a very complex subject but written as simply as possible. It is written for anyone interested in becoming a better informed investor, regardless of how much money they have. If this is your first book on investing, and you are concerned that it might be too complicated, please do not be concerned. All I ask is that you have a willingness to learn and read this book from the beginning to the end with an open mind. If there are parts of the book that you do not understand, then just read the words and continue on to the end. Even if you do not understand everything, you will know more about the subject of investing than many people who are currently investing in the market just by reading all the way through to the conclusion. In fact, by reading the entire book, you will know a lot more about investing than many people who are being paid to give their investment advice. This book begins with the simple and goes into the sophisticated without getting too bogged down in detail and complexity. In many ways, this book starts simple and remains simple, although it covers some very sophisticated investor strategies. This is a story of a rich man guiding a young man, with pictures and diagrams to help explain the often confusing subject of investing. The 90-by-10 rule of money. My rich dad appreciated the Italian economist Vilfredo Pareto's discovery of the 80-by-20 rule, also known as the principle of least effort. Yet when it came to money, Rich Dad was more aware of the 90-by-10 rule, which says that 10% of the people make 90% of the money. I am personally concerned because more and more families are counting on their investments to support them in the future. The problem is that while more people are investing, very few of them are well-educated investors. When the market crashes, what will happen to all these new investors? The federal government of the United States insures our savings from catastrophic loss, but it does not insure our investments. That is why, when I asked my rich dad, what advice would you give the average investor, his reply was, don't be average. How not to be average? I became very aware of the subject of investing when I was just 12 years old. Up until that age, the concept of investing was not really in my head. Baseball and football were on my mind, but not investing. I had heard the word, but I had not really paid much attention until I saw what the power of investing could do. I remember walking along a beach with the man I call my rich dad and his son Mike, my best friend. Rich Dad was showing his son and me a piece of real estate he had just purchased. Although only 12 years old, I realized that my rich dad had just purchased one of the most valuable pieces of property in our town. Even though I was young, I knew that oceanfront property with a sandy beach in front of it was more valuable than property without a beach on it. My first thought was, how can Mike's dad afford such an expensive piece of property? I stood there with the waves washing over my bare feet looking at a man the same age as my real dad who was making one of the biggest financial investments of his life. I was in awe of how he could afford such a piece of land. I knew that my dad made much more money, because he was a highly paid government official with a bigger salary. But I also knew that my real dad could never afford to buy land right on the ocean. So how could Mike's dad afford this land when my dad couldn't? Little did I know that my career as a professional investor had begun the moment I realized the power built into the word investing. Some 40 years after that walk on the beach with my rich dad and his son Mike, I now have people asking me many of the same questions I began asking that day. In the investment classes I teach, people ask me questions similar to those I began asking my rich dad, questions such as, how can I invest when I don't have any money? I have $10,000 to invest. What would you recommend I invest in? Do you recommend investing in real estate, mutual funds, or stocks? Can I buy real estate or stocks without any money? Doesn't it take money to make money? Isn't investing risky? How do you get such high returns with low risk? Can I invest with you? People are beginning to realize the power hidden in the word investing. Many want to find out how to acquire that power for themselves. Many of these questions will be answered for you by the time you've finished reading this book, and if some are not answered here, it is my hope that you are inspired to dig further yourself to find the answers that work for you. Over 40 years ago, the most important thing my rich dad did for me was spark my curiosity on this subject of investing. My curiosity was aroused when I realized that my best friend's dad, a man who made less money than my real dad, at least when comparing paycheck to paycheck, could afford to acquire investments that only rich people could afford. I realized that my rich dad had a power my real dad did not have, and I wanted to have that power also. Many people are afraid of this power and stay away from it, and many even fall victim to it. Instead of running from the power or condemning it by saying such things as, the rich exploit the poor, or investing is risky, or I'm not interested in becoming rich, I became curious. It is my curiosity and my desire to acquire this power, also known as knowledge and abilities, that set me off on a lifelong path of inquiry and learning. Investing like a rich person. While this book may not give you all the technical answers you may want, the intention is to offer you an insight into how many of the richest self-made individuals made their money and went on to acquire great wealth. Standing on the beach at the age of 12, looking at my rich dad's newly acquired piece of real estate, my mind was open to a world of possibilities that did not exist in my home. I realized that it was not money that made my rich dad a rich investor. I realized that my rich dad had a thinking pattern that was almost exactly opposite and often contradicted the thinking of my real dad. I realized that I needed to understand the thinking pattern of my rich dad if I wanted to have the same financial power he had. I knew that if I thought like him, I would be rich forever. I also knew that if I did not think like him, I would never really be rich, regardless of how much money I had. Rich Dad had just invested in one of the most expensive pieces of land in our town, and he had no money. I realized that wealth was a way of thinking and not a dollar amount in the bank. It is this thinking pattern of rich investors that I want to deliver to you in this book. Rich Dad's answer. Standing on the beach 40 years ago, I finally worked up the courage to ask my rich dad, how can you afford to buy these 10 acres of very expensive oceanfront land when my dad can't afford it? Rich Dad then gave me an answer I have never forgotten. He put his arm around me and we turned and started walking down the beach at the water line. Rich Dad began to warmly explain to me the fundamentals of the way he thought about money and investing. His answer began with, I can't afford to buy this land either. But my business can. We walked on the beach for an hour that day, Rich Dad with his son on one side and me on his other side. My investor lessons had begun. Some time ago, I was teaching a 3-day investment course in Sydney, Australia. The first day and a half I discussed the ins and outs of building a business. Finally, in frustration, a participant raised his hand and said, I came to learn about investing. Why are you spending so much time on business? My reply was, there are two reasons. Reason number one is that what we ultimately invest in is a business. If you invest in stocks, you are investing in a business. If you buy a piece of real estate, such as an apartment building, that building is also a business. If you buy a bond, you are also investing in a business. In order to be a good investor, you first need to be good at business. Reason number two is that the best way to invest is to have your business buy your investments for you. The worst way to invest is to invest as an individual. The average investor knows very little about business and often invests as an individual. That is why I spend so much time on the subject of business in an investment course. And that is why this book will spend some time on how to build a business as well as how to analyze a business. I will also spend time on investing through a business because that is how Rich Dad taught me to invest. As he said to me 40 years ago, I can't afford to buy this land either. But my business can. In other words, my Rich Dad's rule was, my business buys my investments. Most people are not rich because they invest as individuals and not as business owners. In this book, you will see why most of the 10% who own 90% of the stocks are business owners and invest through their businesses and how you can do the same. I call these people 90 by 10 investors in this book. Later in the course, the individual who had questioned me understood why I spent so much time talking about business. As the course progressed, that individual and the class began to realize that the richest investors in the world do not buy investments. Most of the 90 by 10 investors created their own investments. The reason we have billionaires who are still in their 20s is not because they bought investments. They created investments, called businesses, that millions of people want to buy. Nearly every day I hear people say, I have an idea for a new product that will make millions. Unfortunately, most of those creative ideas will never be turned into fortunes. The second half of this book will focus on how the 10% turn their ideas into multimillion and even multibillion-dollar businesses that other investors invest in. That is why Rich Dad spent so much time teaching me how to build businesses as well as how to analyze businesses to invest in. So if you have an idea that you think could make you rich, or maybe even help you join the 90 by 10 Investor Club, the second half of this book is for you. Buy, hold, and pray. Over the years, Rich Dad pointed out that investing means different things to different people. Today I often hear people saying such things as, I just bought 500 shares of XYZ company for $5 a share, the price went up to $15 and I sold it. I made $5,000 in less than a week. My husband and I buy old houses, and we fix them up and sell them for a profit. I trade commodity futures. I have over $1 million in my retirement account. Safe as money in the bank. I have a diversified portfolio. I'm investing for the long term. As Rich Dad said, investing means different things to different people. While the above statements reflect different types of investment products and procedures, Rich Dad did not invest in the ways reflected in the preceding statements. He said, most people are not investors. Most people are speculators or gamblers. Most people have the buy, hold, and pray mentality. Most investors live in the hope that the market stays up, and live in fear of the market crashing. A true investor makes money regardless of whether the market is going up or crashing down. They make money regardless of whether they are winning or losing. The average investor does not know how to do that, and that is why most investors are average investors who fall into the 90% that make only 10% of the money. More than buying, holding, and praying. Investing meant more to Rich Dad than buying, holding, and praying. This book will cover the following subjects. 1. The 10 investor controls that can reduce risk and increase profits. Rich Dad said, investing is not risky. Being out of control is risky. 2. The 5 phases of Rich Dad's plan to guide me from having no money to investing with a lot of money. Phase 1 of Rich Dad's plan was preparing my mind to become a rich investor. This is a simple yet very important phase for anyone who wants to invest with confidence. 3. The different tax laws for different investors. In Rich Dad's Cash Flow Quadrant book, I cover the 4 different people found in the world of business. They are: the E stands for employee. The S stands for self-employed or small business. The B stands for business owner. The I stands for investor. Rich Dad encouraged me to invest from the B quadrant because the tax laws are better for investing. Rich Dad always said, the tax laws are not fair. They are written for the rich and by the rich. If you want to be rich, you need to use the same tax laws the rich use. One of the reasons that 10% of the people control most of the wealth is that only 10% know which tax laws to use. In 1943, the federal government plugged most tax loopholes for all employees. In 1986, the federal government took away the tax loopholes from individuals in the S quadrant, individuals such as doctors, lawyers, accountants, engineers, and architects, who had previously enjoyed them. In other words, another reason that 10% of the investors make 90% of the money is that only 10% of all investors know how to invest from the different quadrants in order to gain different tax advantages. The average investor often only invests from one quadrant. 4. Why and how a true investor will make money regardless of whether the market goes up or down. 5. The difference between fundamental investing and technical investing. 6. 5 types of top-level investors. In Rich Dad's Cash Flow Quadrant, I went into the 5 levels of investors. This book classifies the top 2 levels of investors, professional and capitalist, into the following 5 types of investors: the accredited investor, the qualified investor, the sophisticated investor, the inside investor, the ultimate investor. By the end of this book, you will know the different skill and education requirements for each of these investors. 7. The difference between not having enough money and having too much money. Many people say, when I make a lot of money, my money problems will be over. What they fail to realize is that having too much money is as big a problem as not having enough money. In this book you will learn the difference between the 2 kinds of money problems. One problem is the problem of not enough money. The other problem is the problem of too much money. Few people realize how big a problem having too much money can be. One of the reasons so many people go broke after making a lot of money is that they do not know how to handle the problem of too much money. In this book you will learn how to start with the problem of not having enough money, how to make a lot of money, and then how to handle the problem of too much money. In other words, this book will not only teach you how to make a lot of money but, more importantly, it will teach you how to keep it. As Rich Dad said, what good is making a lot of money if you wind up losing it all? A stockbroker friend of mine once said to me, the average investor does not make money in the market. I have seen so many investors make money one year and give it all back the next year. 8. How to make much more than just $200,000, the minimum income level to begin investing in the investments of the rich. Rich Dad said to me, money is just a point of view. How can you be rich if you think $200,000 is a lot of money? If you want to be a rich investor, you need to see that $200,000, the minimum dollar amount to qualify as an accredited investor, is just a drop in the bucket. And that is why phase 1 of this book is so important. Phase 1 of this book, which is preparing yourself mentally to be a rich investor, has a short mental quiz for you at the end of each chapter. Although the quiz questions are simple, they are designed to have you think and maybe discuss your answers with the people you love. It was the soul-searching questions my rich dad asked me that helped me find the answers I was looking for. In other words, many of the answers I was looking for regarding the subject of investing were really inside me all along. What makes the 90 by 10 investor different? One of the most important aspects of this book is the mental differences between the average investor and the 90 by 10 investor. Rich Dad often said, if you want to be rich, just find out what everyone else is doing and do exactly the opposite. As you read this book, you will find out that most of the differences between the 10% of investors who make 90% of the money and the 90% that make only 10% of the money are not what they invest in, but the different ways they think. For example, most investors say, "Don't take risks." The rich investor takes risks. Most investors say, "Diversify." The rich investor focuses. The average investor tries to minimize debt. The rich investor increases debt in their favor. The average investor tries to decrease expenses. Rich investors know how to increase expenses to make themselves richer. The average investor has a job. The rich investor creates jobs. The average investor works hard. The rich investor works less and less to make more and more. The other side of the coin. So an important aspect of reading this book is to notice when your thoughts are often 180 degrees out from the guiding thoughts of my rich dad. Rich Dad said, one of the reasons so few people become rich is that they become set in one way of thinking. They think there is only one way to think or do something. While the average investor thinks, play it safe and don't take risks, the rich investor must also think about how to improve skills so he or she can take more risks. Rich Dad called this kind of thinking on both sides of the coin. He went on, saying, the rich investor must have more flexible thinking than the average investor. For example, while both the average investor and rich investor must think about safety, the rich investor must also think about how to take more risks. While the average investor thinks about cutting down debt, the rich investor is thinking about how to increase debt. While the average investor lives in fear of market crashes, the rich investor looks forward to market crashes. While this may sound like a contradiction to the average investor, it is this contradiction that makes the rich investor rich. As you read through this book, be aware of the contradictions in thinking between average investors and rich investors. As Rich Dad said, the rich investor is very aware that there are two sides to every coin. The average investor sees only one side. And it is the side the average investor does not see that keeps the average investor average and the rich investor rich. The second part of this book is about the other side of the coin. Do you want to be more than an average investor? This book is much more than just a book about investing, hot tips, and magic formulas. One of the main purposes for writing it is to offer you the opportunity to gain a different point of view on the subject of investing. It begins with my returning from Vietnam in 1973 and preparing myself to begin investing as a rich investor. In 1973, Rich Dad began teaching me how to acquire the same financial power he possessed, a power I first became aware of at the age of 12. While standing on the beach in front of my rich dad's latest investment 40 years ago, I realized that when it came to investing, the difference between my rich dad and my poor dad went far deeper than merely how much money each man had to invest. The difference is first found in a person's deep desire to be much more than just an average investor. If you have such a desire, then read on. For Rich Dad Poor Dad audiobook, click on top right corner. Thank you for giving your valuable time for this video. We hope you learned something new today. Stay tuned for our next videos. Hey, don't forget to subscribe, like and share this video to your friends. And turn on bell notification for our updates.